Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, from whichever part of the world you are connecting to this event. My name is Srinivas Gurazada. I work in the PEFA Secretariat, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you and introduce the chair for this event today. So we have today Eric Editionmaker from the European Commission. He works in the Directorate General for International Partnerships. He covers all interesting and important activities that we look forward to. So macroeconomic analysis, public financial management, budget support, and he's one of the members of the PEFA steering committee. In that way, he is one of the main brains behind the PEFA initiative itself, and a very strong supporter of subnational PEFAs. So I hand over to Eric, welcoming Eric, and hand over to Eric, requesting to chair this session. Eric.
I cannot. I'm muted.
Now you are unmuted.
Atani?
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Sorry for these small technical problems, and thank you, Srini, for the introduction. Dear friends, colleagues, esteemed panel of speakers and presenters, thank you everyone for joining us today. It's really a privilege and a pleasure on behalf of the PEFA Secretariat to welcome you to this new webinar, Public Financial Management Systems at Subnational Level, a PEFA Lens. I think we have more than 480 participants registered at this session, quite an impressive number that confirms the popularity of the PEFA, but also a reminder to all of us on how important our work on PFM is. And really, you are coming from all over the world. So while many of you are probably familiar with the PEFA initiatives, or maybe more specifically with the PEFA Performance Measurement Framework, some even intimately, let me just give you some elements of background. The PEFA program was initiated in 2001 already as an international partnership between the government of 6 countries, Switzerland, the UK, France, Luxembourg, Slovakia, Norway, and 3 international organizations, the IMF, the World Bank, and the European Union. So it has just turned 20 years old. Since its introduction, the PEFA measurement framework has been adopted by a wide range of countries as well as international development agencies, but has grown from just a PFM diagnostic tool used by a limited group of donors into really a gold standard catalyst that can assist in PFM reform, formulation, and monitoring by countries themselves, with or without the support from international development partners. So while the core of PEFA methodology was initially focused on central government, it has increasingly been used to assess subnational government PFM performance. Just let me mention and highlight some important facts on the geography of the PEFA at subnational level. So far, overall, 656 PEFA assessments were conducted worldwide, of which already 272 are subnational assessments. Only last year, subnational assessments represent about 40% of all the PEFA evaluations that have been conducted. So that means that subnational assessments have been undertaken in no less than 48 countries. And more interestingly, over the last 2 years, subnational PEFA methodology has been used in countries that were not traditional users or clients of the PEFA. For example, Germany with 4 local governments, as well as the land of Hamburg, Mexico City, China with 8 counties in the Yunnan province that Min will present in a moment. The Brussels Capital Region is currently doing 1 PEFA assessment, Catalonia in Spain, the San Juan province in Argentina that Luz will also present today. So the increase of the use of PEFA by EU, OECD, or G20 countries is important because it really conveys an important message that the PEFA framework is robust and relevant to any government that needs to improve its PFM system, irrespective of the level of development or sophistication of its PFM system. The PEFA has also been used in a wide range of different subnational government, representing different tiers, layers of government, or revenue states, municipalities, provinces, regions, districts, and overseas territories. They have been conducted as standalone assessment or coordinated assessment of several subnational governments in the same countries, and sometimes together with national assessments. So more recently, and in order to better use the framework to different types of subnational entities, but also to reduce the cost of the assessment and making it more agile, flexible, and simple, the PEFA Secretariat has adjusted the methodology. And we will hear today from the PEFA Secretariat more on the key features of this revised SNG PEFA framework. It's also important to add that this evolution is taking place within a broader agenda of initiatives led by the PEFA initiative and Secretariat, with, for instance, the development of supplementary modules on climate budgeting and gender-responsive budgeting, but also in initiating works on how to strengthen the linkage between the PEFA and service delivery in specific sectors. And indeed, subnational governments play a crucial role in terms of service delivery, but they are also key players in the climate change adaptation and mitigation policies through, for instance, urban planning, land management, transportation, or housing policies. So we will see today in today's presentation that the application of the PEFA at subnational level has been really instrumental in identifying strengths and weaknesses of PFM system, contributing to develop PFM reform programs to address those weaknesses, but also advancing in intergovernmental and decentralization reforms in an increasing number of countries. So we have a lot on our plates for today, a lot of topics, and I'm sure that they will raise. So thanks again for your interest and your attention. And with this, I immediately hand over the proceedings to Adenike to moderate the sessions and introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eric. Thanks very much, Eric. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Okay, looks like we're having a speak back, if I may call that. Okay, good morning again, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is connected to this call today. We currently have 192 participants and the number is growing. And for me, this shows the importance of what we're going to discuss today. Eric, thanks very much for that introduction. Let me also use the opportunity to thank all our PEFA partners who are working very hard to make sure that PFM is very relevant in supporting the entire countries of the world in what they do. My name is Adenike Oyeyola. I'm a practice manager in the governance global practice of the World Bank. And I have the responsibility of being in charge of the PEFA Secretariat, the great team that are hosting this event today. And I'll be your moderator for the event. So the topic we are discussing today is public financial management systems at subnational levels. And we'll be looking at this from a PEFA lens. And when we talk about subnational levels, I'm sure we all know, we're talking about state governments, we're talking about local governments, we're talking about regional governments. And we know that this level of government is very, very important in the development of a nation as in general. So today, we'll be discussing a very important work that has been done by the PEFA Secretariat, and we'll be showcasing how the countries are using this work. The PEFA Secretariat has carried out or have developed what we call PEFA assessment at the subnational level, and using this to prepare public financial management reform programs, monitoring and evaluation, and move forward the intergovernmental and fiscal decentralization reforms in countries. And with this framework, we've had some countries who have started to use it. And what we'll be doing today is looking at these country cases on how this is going to be doing. So I'll be guiding us through the process, and we're going to break the discussions today into 3 core parts. I'll first call on my colleagues in the PEFA Secretariat, Julia Dimitri and Guillaume Brill, who will be the ones that will present the framework itself. They will present the key features of the revised guidelines for the subnational government PEFA assessment. Right after them, we'll be looking at 3 country cases, and I'll be inviting some distinguished speakers who are experts in this field and who have used it in these countries to talk to us. And right after that, then I'll open it to the audience. We'll answer all the questions you have. So let me say at this point that please put your comments, your questions, your remarks in the chat box. And for those of us who are connected on YouTube or on whichever place, put your comments there. We're going to be attending to as much as possible today. I have colleagues who are helping me to monitor all those screens. And then we'll have, a general comment, a general overview by our own Seda Yilmaz, who is a lead colleague in the bank, but also who is also leading one of the global solution groups that oversees subnational governments. So I would like to introduce our distinguished speakers and presenters before I pass it on to my colleagues in the PEFA Secretariat. So today we're going to have Min Zhao. Min is in the World Bank, and she's a senior economist. I think she'll be giving us the experience from subnational assessment in China. We have Luz Maria Meyer, senior financial management specialist, also with the World Bank, who will be giving us the Argentina experience. And I have Mary Majeke, Director of Provincial Budget Analysis of Intergovernmental Relations Division in the National Treasury of South Africa. She'll give us the perspective from South Africa. So at this point, let me now invite my colleagues, Julia Dimitri and Guillaume Brill, to present the key features of the revised subnational government PEFA guidance. Julia and Guillaume, 7 minutes to give us this very good presentation. Over to you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening to all you colleagues that we are very pleased, so numerous today, and 12 people already. So that's super cool. Can I have the presentation? Yeah. Thanks a lot, Karen. So I'd like to start by can you switch to the next slide, by highlighting again the importance of the topic today when you are interested in PFMs. 4 figures just to show that first of all, public expenditure of the subnational government level represents 24%, so a quarter of the total public expenditure of on average. It represents almost 40% of the public investment. When you go to the service delivery, which is so important, a sector like education, the spending by subnational government in education are 15% of the spending of a country on average. And finally, another indicator to convincing you of the importance of the topic, subnational government represents 35% of the public staff expenditure. So you see that if you want to spend public finances better, you have also to take into account the subnational sector for strengthening the capacity and strengthening the capacity of PFM. So can you switch the slide? Thanks a lot. So we released the approach of the PEFA framework for subnational governments to have a better implementation of this tool at the subnational levels regarding such an importance. What did we?
Sorry, Guillaume.
First,
sorry to interrupt
just
you,
the
Guillaume.
PEFA framework, and we will present you some aspects.
Guillaume.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Please, Adenike.
There's a break in
Yep.
your voice. Can I suggest that you put off your video while you are making the presentation? Would that be okay? Thanks.
Okay. I hope it will be. So there is, we have adjusted the PEFA framework, first of all, and we will present you some aspects of it. We adjusted the process. It's a minor thing, but it will help decreasing the cost of implementing a PEFA assessment. Then we added to our ranges of tools 2 new small tools, one on service delivery and one other on the fiscal decentralization system. And finally, we simplified the report format. Can you go to the next slide, please, Karen? Thanks. Adjustment to the framework. What did we do? We added 2 new indicators because they're not included in the regular framework. One on public consultation that we call PI9 bis. It's in the transparency. It has a look at the public consultation, budget preparation for the service delivery design investment. There is also one indicator about the fiscal rule monitoring of the fiscal position by the central government. So to be sure that the central government has a good understanding on the fiscal position of all subnational governments. We added also new dimensions to the existing indicators. One specific about property taxes into the revenue administration indicator, and one other on the predictability of transfers on a medium-term horizon, because we think that it's very important for the subnational governments to have a clear vision of their transfers from the central government on a medium-term perspective. Julia, can I to you?
Thank you so much, Guillaume. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you connected with us today. So let me go to the rest of the revisions of the framework. So the other adjustments include merging 3 indicators of the 4th pillar on the policy-based fiscal strategy and budgeting into the new indicator on medium-term budget strategy. However, it's important to highlight that in the case of applying the framework in federal states with extended authority, fiscal, political, and administrative decentralization, the countries can choose to apply the full set of macro-fiscal indicators. In addition, we have adjusted more than 20 dimensions, and the changes relate to narrowing down the coverage and simplifying the requirement. We have also improved and clarified the applicability of the indicators and dimension when applied at the subnational level. And we really hope that through these changes, the revised guidance has been simplified and it is more relevant to the SNGs. The next slide, Karen, please. Another important feature of the revised guidance is the introduction of a supplementary model on service delivery. And this model is completely optional. And why it was introduced and what is the rationale behind that? So we started the presentation by highlighting the significant role that these SNGs present as a share of public sector expenditure. But also when it comes to decentralization and the devolution of key public services to the subnational government. So they play an important role in the provision of such services. So taking advantage of the PEFA assessment, being in the field, the service delivery model through a set of diagnostic questions mapped around the PEFA framework will help to collect and analyze information. And what is important that on the basis of it, assess how the subnational PFM performance affect service delivery. And just a little bit about this module. So we are not using the typical PEFA scoring system of an A, B, and C, and D. So mainly the observations and the assessment would be presented as an annex of the PEFA assessment report and some other specific parts of the report. And it is very important that before going for the assessment, to decide and to agree on which services we are going to cover and assess, but also to have a good understanding of how the service delivery is arranged, is organized in the country, and also the distribution of the roles and responsibilities between the subnational and the central government. I won't get into the details of the service delivery model, but the guidance note that we have prepared and is publicly available in the PEFA website is there and provides all the information. So I strongly encourage you to have a look at it. The next slide, Karen. And the last part that I want to cover is to give you an overview. Where do we stand with the application of PEFA framework at the subnational level, and also the pilot testing of the revised guidance? So despite COVID-19 health crisis, which has turned our life upside down, and also the suspension of the international travel, as you can see from the colorful map, which presents the subnational government PEFA assessment, but as well as the ones that are pilot testing the revised guidance, the message and the data and the evidence there is that the application of PEFA at the SNG level continues to be strong. It is also important to highlight that when it comes to the PEFA at the subnational level, as Eric mentioned in his opening remarks, so we have entered into new markets, right? So we have Brussels region, we have Germany, we have China, the first ever PEFA assessment that Min will talk about it, or San Juan province in Argentina that Luz will share with us. And most of these countries have applied the revised guidance. So the demand for piloting the revised guidance is quite good. However, we welcome any recommendation and suggestion that you may have for subnational government which might be interested in pilot testing the revised guidance. Thank you so much. A real pleasure to present in such a distinguished audience. And over to you, Nika. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Guillaume and Julia. Very interesting presentation. So, colleagues, Julie and Guillaume have told us about the new, the updates. They've told us about the key features of the revised guidance. They've talked about the new indicators, the revised indicators, and the optional supplementary modules that are there. They've also talked about the ongoing pilots and what is the next step of what we want to do. So at this point, I would like us to look at some country experience of using these guidelines already. So I would like to call on Min Zhao. Again, Min Zhao is senior economist. So Min, we've carried out 8 PEFA assessments in Hunan province of China already. Could you run us through the experience so far? If you can do that in 8 to 10 minutes, that would be very helpful. Over to you, Min.
Thank you, Enrica. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's really a great privilege and pleasure to share experience from China. Next slide. Yeah, we just completed the first ever PEFA assessments in China. This assessment covers 8 selected counties of Hunan province. We conducted during the COVID-19 lockdown period. So what makes these assessments really special are two innovative practices. The first is synergized with the learning operation, the Hunan Subnational Governance and the Rural Public Service Delivery Program for Results Operation. And the second is it's almost exclusively relying on the national assessors to complete this assessment. Next slide. Yeah, this assessment covers all 8 counties supported by the World Bank PEFA operation. They are selected out of 122 counties in Hunan, representing different levels of development and fiscal and administrative capacities. From these slides, you will find that their per capita incomes ranges from over 100,000 RMB to in the rich counties and to only 20,000 RMB in the poorest counties. Next slide. Why we conducted this subnational PEFA? At that time, the Hunan province was engaging with the World Bank to design and implement a program for results operation. The initial objective of this operation is to support the government to implement the government's ambitious rural revitalization program. The expenditure of this rural revitalization program accounts for half of the county government's budget, and the institutional capacity of county governments is critical to the success. China's intergovernmental system is highly asymmetric. The revenue side is highly centralized, and while the expenditure side is highly decentralized. So this feature confines the local budgeting and PFM in many ways and affects their local government's ability to achieve fiscal sustainability, strategic allocation of resources, and the delivery of public services. So Hunan province is committed to deepening its PFM reforms. And so we agreed to conduct a PEFA assessment in these 8 counties. So to analyze the performance of them, and so we can use the results to inform the design of their PEFA operation, as well as provide a baseline against which future development of county government's PFM systems can be measured. Next slide. So the PEFA assessment results reveal that county governments in China are very strong in budget execution and implementation. They're very good to get things done. However, the main PFM weaknesses are found in the upstream of the budget institution, lack of predictability of high-level government transfers, the weak budget transparency and inadequate fiscal citizen engagement, and inadequate capacity of debt management. So with this, we focus our first results area of this lending operation to strengthen the institutions of the intergovernmental fiscal management and transparency, specifically focus on to address the weaknesses, the weaknesses identified in these 3 sub-elements. Of course, a strong PFM system is not a panacea for everything. So we have additional results area focused on stimulating the subnational government's performance by introducing a results-oriented finance mechanism. So the next slide. So following up this PEFA assessment, Hunan province embedded its commitment to the PFM reform in the PEFA. And in the program agreements, it put in the program action plan that Hunan province will provide guidance and ensure that all 8 pilot counties will develop and implement a PFM reform plan based on the findings from the PEFA assessment. In addition, they're committed to carry out another round of PEFA assessment in 2024 to measure the progress they will make in the next 4 years. And as those who are not familiar with the P4R operation, this is a lending instrument the bank developed, which under this operation, the loan proceeds will be dispersed against agreed results. So for this Hunan operation, we agreed that part of those loan proceeds were dispersed against the agreed achievement or the achievement of the score of the PEFA's selected PEFA indicators. We particularly focus on the 3 indicators: the debt management, PI 13, the predictability of high-level government transfers, and public access to the fiscal information. Next slide. So another feature of this PEFA assessments is that we complete this assessment within 1 year, despite of the disruption and the travel restriction during the COVID-19 lockdown period. I think the faster, quick completion of this assessment is attributed to the innovative practice that these assessments were conducted almost exclusively by national assessors. The initial rationale we decided to go with the national assessors are twofold. On the one hand, we were under budget constraint and a tight time pressure. We were expected to deliver the PEFA lending operation in 1 year, and we needed the PEFA assessment results to inform the PEFA operation. And on the other hand, the government asked us to help build local capacity so that they can apply it to the rest of the province and also in the future by themselves. Next slide. However, we fully understand this risk is not without risks. In particular, this is the first time China conducted a PEFA assessment, so the local assessors don't have experience and knowledge about the PEFA assessments. And also we are concerned about the assessment credibility and quality. So mitigation measures were taken. We spent a lot of efforts to build local capacity. The PEFA Secretariat extended very strong advisory support through the whole process. We provided extensive training to national assessors, and then the PEFA Secretariat experts, Julia and Guillaume, participated in the mission and provided on-site advisory support to the assessment teams. And on the other hand, we also introduced a very strong, rigorous quality assurance mechanism. We agreed with the Hunan provincial government to that all assessments should receive PEFA accreditation. And we will request the peer reviewer and ask for the consultation for the PEFA assessments reports. In addition, we set up 2 assessment teams working in parallel, each covering 4 counties. And so the 2 teams can compare notes and identify if there are any problems. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. So in building up this assessment team, we deliberately selected the members from 4 institutions. In addition to the World Bank Beijing office, we also recruit assessors from 1 top university and the China Academy of Physical Sciences of Central Ministry of Finance and Hunan-based universities. The members from each institutions, their skills are complementary, and together can cover all areas of PEFA assessment. So by the time we complete the PEFA assessment, we not only deliver 8 assessment reports, but also leave the government with 3 local teams that can conduct PEFA assessment independently in the future. So, okay, let me stop here. And the last slide. To conclude my presentation, I would like to highlight these 2 innovative practices again. The PEFA assessment could inform the government about the design of PFM reform. When they are linked with the bank's PEFA operation, it makes the government's reform commitment more credible and also allows the government to access to the bank's technical assistance for implementation. And it can be cost and time efficient when relying more on local assessors, but the risks need to be carefully managed. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to further discussion during Q&A session.
Thanks very much, Min. That's really helpful. And thanks for keeping to the 10 minutes so that we can have a very good conversation. So colleagues, you can see the experience of the first PEFA assessment in 8 Yunnan provinces in China. The interesting part is this was carried out during the pandemic, so it was a mix of virtual and in person, and also the use of academia. She has emphasized the importance of ownership and leadership by government, and using these to inform PFM reforms, and very importantly, the great support that was received by the PEFA Secretariat. So let's hear the experience from the, I think, San Juan province in Argentina. Luz will correct my pronunciation if I'm not correcting it, pronouncing it very well. So Luz, over to you too, 8 to 10 minutes. Let's hear the Argentina experience. And you can put your video on, please.
Thank you, Adenike. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariat team for inviting me to showcase the recent experience of this PEFA in San Juan province, and thanks to all the participants for joining this event. I am currently co-leading this subnational assessment, and I think this has been one of the most challenging assignments ever. When we started this process, we asked ourselves, it is possible to perform an analytical work like a PEFA assessment during this pandemic context? We weren't sure about that, but now we're convinced that the answer is yes. The next slide, please, Karen. Just to give you a quick overview of my presentation, I will start with some background information. I will share with you some reflections, mainly focused on the challenges we faced, how the new guidance was applied, the PEFA process management, main outcomes, as well as next steps. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just providing you with a context, I would like to highlight the engagement with the Federal Council for Fiscal Responsibility in Argentina. Almost 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to attend a PEFA training delivered in Lima, Peru, when I met the technical coordinator of the council there. I then tried to open a dialogue between the bank and the council, taking into account that both agendas in terms of transparency, accountability, and governance issues were very related. This council is integrated by the finance departments of almost all the provinces and the federal government. This dialogue resulted in some key initiatives. The council requests bank support to deliver a training workshop in Argentina on the PEFA methodology. We then received a request from the federal government to conduct a PEFA. I had the opportunity to be a key core member of this first time ever PEFA assessment for Argentina federal government that was successfully completed in December 2019 in a record time. Main PEFA findings of this PFM assessment were presented at the council more than 1 year ago. Then San Juan expressed interest in conducting a PEFA and requested support from the bank. The council has been part of the oversight team, peer reviewing the national PEFA as well as the San Juan one. It is worth to mention that a previous assessment was undertaken in the province of San Juan following the old framework. This was completed in 2012, and this was a partial PEFA since some of the performance indicators were assessed. Next, please, Karen. Thank you. Just to give you a quick geographical reference, San Juan is one of the provinces located in the western part of Argentina. The structure comprises 23 provinces and the autonomous city of Buenos Aires, which is treated as a province from a political point of view. There were no simultaneous PEFA assessments at the subnational level in Argentina at this stage. San Juan is the first province with a full PEFA assessment applying the new guidance. The next slide, please. Our main challenges were focused on COVID pandemic situation. We had travel restrictions, lockdown costs, counterpart not working on a daily basis, no physical access to their offices, sometimes access to computer and good internet connections were also difficult to ensure. In terms of the government engagement, as you can imagine, new priorities appeared and were not related to carry out an diagnostic like a PEFA, but taking immediately actions to deal with the crisis. Besides, this PEFA assessment represented our key entry point to begin working on the subnational level in Argentina. So, how to provide San Juan counterpart fully understanding of the PEFA methodology was also challenging. The application of the new guidance for some national governments also represented a key challenge and a risk for the team and our counterparts. Next slide, please. When planning the assessment, we had team discussion on which version of the guidance we should apply. We had two options, the supplementary guidance issued in 2016 or the new testing version. The new version was highly recommended by the peer reviewers and the Secretariat, so we decided at the concept note stage the application of this new guidance for San Juan. It is worth to mention that we received full endorsement by the Secretariat since key initiatives were sponsored. The PEFA training workshop for the government official, this event was delivered in Spanish. The new guidance was also translated in Spanish, and a virtual open house event was held last October when the team promoted a new PFM product covering the subnational guidance. This event was also delivered in Spanish. The next, please. You will find here the adjustments to the framework introduced by the new guidance and how this was applied in San Juan. All the new features were applied, but as you can see, HLG2 indicator as well as the additional optional model on service delivered were not used in the diagnostic. The next, please, Karen. In the case of San Juan, the entire assessment process has been carried out virtually, which includes initial meetings with the government, the concept note stage, the PEFA training, the field mission. All the meetings were conducted through WebEx, Team, and also through WhatsApp conversations according to counterparts availability, which was reduced by the pandemic. You can imagine the number of virtual meetings scheduled. The documentation was entirely provided electronically. Information publicly available helped the data collection process. This requires strong coordination with the government institutions. I would like to emphasize here the flexibility of the members of the team. When I mention the team, I'm referring to the extended team composed by the bank staff, the consultants, the counterparts in San Juan, the members of the oversight committee. The government focal point in San Juan also played a key role during the assessment. Additional team efforts were required through a home-based work environment. The field mission took more than 2 months. We also had an internal QA review of the draft report, which is at this stage already reviewed by peer reviewers, the Secretariat, and the government of San Juan. The next, please, Karen. We are currently reviewing the comments provided by the government of San Juan on the draft report, which were received last week. We are trying, as you can see, to move forward to step number 8, the final report. The next, please. This is the PEFA assessment implementation schedule for San Juan. You will find here a summary of key tasks, deliverables, as well as date of completion. Highlighted in green are the completed steps. Although all the challenges we faced during the assessment, the experience in San Juan demonstrated that a PEFA process could be undertaken with good quality and also in a record time. The next, please. This figure shows the results of the assessment at the pillar and as the performance indicators level. Just a quick overview on the scores. The next one, please. As I mentioned, we are currently reviewing comments received by the government on the draft report. We're working on the revised draft report along with the matrix with all the reviewers' comments and responses. We will share this package with the Secretariat to obtain the PEFA check. Final version of the report will be delivered to the client. And we will try here to explore how PEFA findings could be used as an entry point for a broader policy dialogue with the government in terms of PFM actions, subnational governance and decentralization issues, gender and climate change initiatives, and this PEFA may serve as an incentive to other provinces to undertake their own PEFAs. Time will tell. The last one slide, please. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Luz. And it's so interesting that despite the pandemic, we've all refused to be limited. I mean, yeah, I thought the China one was the interesting one. I mean, it's quite interesting with the mix of virtual and in person, but this is 100% virtual, like you said. And I mean, it's very interesting that you are getting very good comments from the government and using these as an entry point for broader policy dialogue with governments. I think that's very, very important and pertinent. Thanks for the perspective. So now I would like to go to Mary. Mary is Director of Promise Budget Analysis in the Intergovernmental Relations Division, National Treasury, South Africa. So Mary, let's get your perspectives. We've done a first batch of provincial PEFAs. That was in, I think, around 2014, 2015. So let's get the perspective. What were the outcomes and what's your thinking? Over to you, Mary.
Thank you, moderator. I will just wait for the presentation to load. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to all the colleagues. Such a pleasure to be presenting the South African provincial assessment perspective. As you have said, we did our assessment for all the 9 provinces, but due to financial strain, we first did the first 4 in 2013, and then we did the 5 in 2014-15 financial year within all the 9 South African provinces. And also to mention that we are still a little bit behind. We used the 2011 framework. We haven't gotten to the 2016 framework. Next slide, Karen. So in my discussion, I'll talk about the rationale. Why did we do it for the provinces, the role players, the summary of the outcomes out of conducting the assessment, and also how then did it help the provinces in benchmarking against each other, the impact that PEFA did in assisting us with the strengthening of the PFM reforms, as well as the future PFM assessments that we want to do based on the 2016 framework and looking at the service delivery model. Next slide. Okay, so when we heard about PEFA, then we decided that then maybe we should introduce it. It was done in the national sphere, so we decided, okay, then let's do it in the provincial sphere. So the rationale really was for us to use the assessment as a baseline for information and monitoring to facilitate the dialogue among the spheres of government, especially between the provinces in terms of the PFM dialogue, to assess the impact of South Africa's open and orderly PFM system on service delivery and fiscal discipline. As the colleagues will know that South Africa and Switzerland always score high on ODI in terms of the transparency, but then we also wanted to see, as PEFA goes deeper into the indicators, just to see then how is it really impacting in the service delivery? Are we getting better as we are good in the transparency? We also wanted to integrate the findings into integrated strategic support plans. So we have these plans for each province, looking at the weaknesses that the province has, and then we develop a strategic support plan. So the findings from PEFA were also going to assist in boosting that, identify transversal interventions for common functional system or process weaknesses, so that then we capitalize. If there is one common problem in all the provinces, then we capitalize by coming up with one intervention. We also wanted to learn PEFA tools and other diagnostic tools on the basis of recent assessment and devise the strategies to improve the PFM performance and in the future and in the current moment. And we also then wanted to make sure that the assessment then fit into the reflection in informing and guiding government PFM capacity development program that we are having. The next slide. Okay, so this is just briefly the summary of what happened when we did the assessment. So let me just mention that we did each province individually. So there was a team of 6 to 10 people who were responsible for conducting assessment in one province, and then for all the 9 provinces. And at the end, then we consolidated the report. So we have 9 plus 1 PEFA reports in South Africa. So then the other ones were done earlier, the other ones were done later. So if we look, colleagues, in terms of the budget credibility, we're not doing so bad. We are fine there. We found provinces like Mpumalanga and Western Cape, they performed better there because in South Africa, the way the intergovernmental system is based is that the plans, the priorities are done at the national. So the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation will then outline the priorities, and then the National Treasury then will link the funds to those priorities and then communicate with the provinces in terms of the MTF, the guidelines, to say this is what the priorities are and this is how you are to fund them. And generally, we ask the provinces to use the national funds towards the social sector services. So in terms of the credibility, it's quite credible. So the guidelines, circulars are sent from national and then they get duplicated. Then the provinces, they've got allocation letters. So everybody is clear on what the budget is supposed to be doing. And then we also scored very high in terms of the budget comprehensiveness and transparency. As I said, that we are one of the number 1 countries in ODI. But yeah, as much as we are number 1 in terms of the comprehensiveness and transparency, we still have a challenge in terms of the public participation in our budget processes. So we're still working on improving on that. Again, in the policy-based budgeting, is not that bad, and we find provinces like Gauteng and Western Cape and as well as Northern Cape doing very well there. I think there the issue was for them being able to properly cost the capital projects, while other provinces couldn't do that properly. Hence, they've got the slight low score there. Predictability, that is our challenge. the SCM, contract management, you know, how we spend the money. Are we spending on places that we want to spend on time? So that one is just a challenge. And even our Auditor General, we've got quite a huge percentage of irregular expenditure, which indicates that the rates are not really followed, the plans are not being really followed when we spend the money. Then we've got accounting and recording and external scrutiny. That is, we're also doing well there. Our legislatures are working with the provinces to make sure that the budgets are tabled on time, they come and then account to the legislature, except that now the action is not really being followed up on whatever the Auditor General said. The challenge was, is the department really engaging and resolving that? So that is the challenge that we are having. Next slide. Okay, to summarize then the outcomes that we had from our 9 provinces. Well, the fact that I have said that we have a transparent MTF, it helps in maintaining the aggregate fiscal discipline. Provinces, they make sure that they don't table a deficit budget. And also with their own revenue that they are collecting, then they are able to then prioritize on their own provincial or economic growth priorities. But the national one, they make sure that it goes to your health, education, and social development. We also found, in terms of the strategic allocation of resources, the budget is prepared over the MTF, which helps to set the framework for relative budget priorities, as I've said, and intended to reflect the department's budgetary ceilings. So then we have the quite effective allocation and strategic allocation of resources that goes where it's supposed to be during the planning phase. Next slide. In terms of the efficient service delivery and effective service delivery, that's where then we found out that we are lacking due to the fact that the pillar of the procurement, the CM, is scoring low. That means that when money is given for certain projects and those projects don't get finished, it means that the public do not get the services that they were being promised. So then we found that, okay, we're good in PFM, but then we're not really getting there in terms of making sure that the services are delivered as perfectly as they should be. Well, there is some improvement, but it's not really that pleasing. Then you have those sectors that are having challenges, like we still have provinces that still struggling to build schools, but we're working on that. And also the ability for planning and management of the territory is undermined by the focusing of the own revenue. Remember, the resources from the national can never be enough. So the provinces are encouraged to say, have your targets of how much revenue on those. Okay, they cannot collect revenue maybe from the general personnel taxes, but they collect from the motor vehicle, casino taxes, and all this. So we try, and they're also encouraged to find other avenues where they can collect taxes so that then they can beef up their funds. Next slide. Okay, so now after we did that, it was quite an interesting engagement and support we really got from the provinces and not just the treasuries, but even the other departments. So then we had a conference in order now to iron out the challenges that were there, assess the strengths and the weaknesses within the provinces. It was sometimes even competitive. Other provinces were like, no, Northwest cannot score more than me. From Free State, we're doing 1, 2, 3. So out of that, there was that peer learning to say, okay, so now Western Cape, you're not getting so bad in procurement. How do you do this? How do you manage your compensation of employees? So it was that we created that environment, and out of that, we also had work groups looking at each functional area or the pillar, looking at the short-term and the longer-term solutions that we can put in. The conference basically was just for knowledge sharing, as well as then now coming up with the reforms that we can to assist all the provinces. The next slide. Don't know how much I'm doing with time. Okay. In terms,
you can just round up. If you can just round up, Mary. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Yes, I was just asking myself how I'm doing. Thank you. The slide just talks about the reforms that we are having out of that assessment. We have included then the procurement plans, even the infrastructure plans, we call them the B5, that are there in the budget books so that we know which projects the money is going to be spent on. We've got the Office of the Procurement that is busy improving on our SCM processes, and they are busy working on the procurement bill. We've got the contract management framework that we're working on. And the one that is interesting is a bid appeals tribunal, whereby only KZN had. So now we are working on getting all the provinces having it. So we are really trying to make sure that we reduce the burden on the court system, because when the supplier is not happy, they go to the court. The last one is just the programs that we are having within the provinces. Next slide. The future plans, yeah, we would like to be like China. We have just had a training of 26 officials that the plan there is for us to conduct self-assessment so that we don't have to wait for funds, even when the funds are not there. The National Treasury and eventually the provincial colleagues can conduct their own assessment. And we also want to include more civil society, the academia, because in the last assessment, they were not that much involved. So we think that will then improve the accountability and also the public participation, as we said it was lacking. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mary. I'm sure quite a lot to learn from the South African experience. I'm also happy that you also identify things that can be learned from the other countries, from China, from Argentina. Thanks so much for the presentation. So at this point, before I open up for questions and answers, I would like to call on Seda Yilmaz, the lead public sector specialist in the bank, but also the global lead for subnational governance in the governance global practice, to give us his insights. Seda, you've had 3 country experiences, China, Argentina, South Africa, and of course, you're doing quite a lot of work on subnational governance. So let's get your insights. It's about 8 minutes, Seda, thanks.
Thank you, Nike. I've just turned on my video briefly to show my face, and I'm going to stop it right now, and then I'll share my screen with you.
You can keep your video on. We want to continue to see the face.
Okay. All right, you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So what I want to do is I want to give you my brief take on subnational PEFAs, and I would like to incorporate these country case studies into my presentation. And I wanted to start with a controversial or provocative statement, but I think Guillaume stole my thunder. Why do we need subnational PEFAs? If you remember Guillaume's very first presentation, very first slide on the share of public expenditures at the subnational level. If you are spending 24% of your expenditures at the subnational level, or 39% of your public investment at the subnational level, you better know what's going on down there. And PEFA, subnational PEFA, gives you that instrument. And in our webinar today, we have there are 3 presentations on 2 main uses, and I think there is another use of PEFA, which I'll come back to that point towards the end of my slides. The very first example is, of course, the use for development partners in informing their projects and programs. I think China example, the Hunan province example, is a quite interesting one. And then there is also the use by national governments to help their subnational governments in terms of improving their financial resources. And South Africa example is perfect in that sense. Going to the very first use of subnational PEFAs for development partners, let me use World Bank as an example. In the bank, we have a huge portfolio about subnational governments, and our evaluation colleagues, independent evaluation group, is actually conducting an evaluation of our subnational portfolio as we speak. And in their definition, and this is covering 10 years from FY 2008 to FY 17, in their definition of subnational projects at the World Bank, and when I say projects, these are lending projects using our 3 instruments, which we call investment project financing and program for results, which we used in Hunan, for example, and the budget support operations. Out of 3,000 plus operations, lending operations, 800 of them are subnational projects. So this is almost 1 every 3 World Bank operations, lending operations, are related to subnational levels. And in fact, if we are trying to extend that data set from 2017 to 2020, and in the last 3 years, we have found additional 300 projects. So it seems like the subnational projects, the share of subnational projects are increasing in the World Bank's portfolio. In that sense, PEFA can be a very important instrument helping subnational governments to improve their systems for better delivery of services. And I gave here an example for our non-lending projects. We call them technical assistance or analytical, and we use these acronyms. So ASA, analytical, and it skips my mind right now. Anyhow, these are non-lending projects, and they are also a significant share of our portfolio. So what I did was I just went to our operations portal and picked 3 projects, randomly picked these 3 projects, try to see what they are trying to achieve. And as you can see, in all of our subnational projects, capacity is an important element. We have the word capacity in the project development objective. And even though we have this word capacity, and what capacity means is subject to questioning. And to me, there is a very specific meaning of capacity, particularly in the context of subnational governments and service delivery. And there is actually an academic literature, what's called this black box theories of public financial management. And I have listed some of these pieces within the literature. And the literature actually defines public financial management as one of the components of capacity at the local level. Of course, the other capacity is human resource management capacity. Then one can include performance and information technology as other components. But if you think about public sector, and particularly at the local government level, there are really 2 important resources that local governments manage. One is the fiscal resources, the other is the human resources. The combination of these 2 resources translates to service delivery or service delivery outcomes. So in that sense, if we are going to design projects, programs supporting service delivery at the local level, we better improve financial management and human management capacity. And with that in mind, I think PEFA is a perfect tool to basically identify or understand the strengths and weaknesses of public financial management systems. And in fact, the slide that I have right now in front of you, it's directly from PEFA website. It's the use of PEFA which gives you weaknesses and strengths in quantitative indicators. So in that sense, PEFA is instrumental in improving the capacity, financial management capacity at the local level. Then if we can look at the use of PEFAs, I think in the case of informing development partner projects or programs, you can design the intervention using PEFA in different ways. One is basically if you are dealing with single subnational government, as was the case with San Juan province in Argentina, it's a single government, and then you basically help help the provincial government to understand how their subnational financial management systems operate. Or you can do multiple subnational governments. You can do some sampling and try to understand what's happening across a province, looking at third-tier local governments, which is the case with Hunan. They are looking at the counties within the province, and some sampling methodology helped them to select those 8 counties. But there is also another use of PEFA in our projects and portfolios, which is the sector projects. And if you look at it, actually, some of our projects in the sectors, health sector, education sector, or water sector, they are also trying to improve the institutional capacity of local governments to deliver services specific to their sector. But it's if you really think about it, it's the same system used across all of these sectors. So the sector projects can be also very important in improving capacity at the local level, and PEFA can help them. Another use of PEFA is country-driven assessments, and South Africa is a perfect example. And in fact, I'm really impressed the way they designed the intervention, looking at all of the provinces and then convening a conference and then knowledge sharing and capacity development program. I think that's a perfect example. But we have to go one step further as well, and maybe South Africa might be the perfect candidate for this thing. I think subnational PEFAs can be used in designing grant systems, particularly performance grant systems. If you want to signal subnational governments, whether it is provincial level or local level, that they do a better job on their performance management. This is in the case of public financial management. It's improving their both budgeting and expenditure systems. You might want to reward them as well through the performance grant system. So maybe the next step in the use of PEFA exercise is to merge these two tools to use performance or the grant system, intergovernmental transfer system, to basically award better performance in public financial management. And that doesn't mean that you are going to penalize relatively poor performers. You can help them through the capacity improvement interventions, and the transfer systems or the intergovernmental fiscal architecture can easily accommodate these things. I think that should be the future of subnational PEFA. Maybe that's where we have to work closely with our PEFA Secretariat colleagues, bringing these two tools together. So this is my take on today's webinar. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Seda, and that's very insightful. So we turn to questions and answers now. And Seda, I'm just going to start with you straight away. We've had some very interesting questions coming in. So Seda, I mean, thanks for the overview, and I know you've had substantial experience on subnational governance in the bank. So, I mean, from your perspectives, could you tell us what are the most common PFM weaknesses at the subnational level in comparison to the national level? Seda, over to you. In 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I can answer in 1 minute, but I think one of the things, first of all, when we talk about subnational, the word subnational can mean 100 million population Indian state governments versus 500-person commune in Burkina Faso. So we have a huge range. But one of the things that I find in almost all of the countries vis-a-vis decentralization or devolution reforms, the PFM weaknesses is the excuse for decentralization. So if you talk to central authorities, it's always, oh, the local governments or subnational governments don't have the capacity to manage resources, so why should we waste our resources? And it varies from country to country. Of course, in some countries, the weaknesses are both on the upstream side of budget planning and everything, than the downstream execution part of it. But I think we have to use these tools, and maybe we have to also work with national authorities in terms of making the subnational PEFA context specific. In the case of 500 people in a commune, maybe you don't need to answer all of these questions, but you focus on the main elements of budget preparation and budget execution. And then for 100 million Indian state government, you can use the full subnational PEFA instrument to look at the whole cycle, which they did in South Africa, for example. I think this can give us a very good picture of the weaknesses, both in the upstream and downstream of the PFM cycle. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Seda. I'd like someone from the PEFA Secretariat to take this next question. Srini, Julie, Guillaume, any one of you can jump at it. So just for clarity, what is the definition of subnational government revenue and expenditure? Does it include central government expenditure made at subnational level? And also somebody wanted to know what happens if I have two levels of subnational government, provinces and municipalities, or states and local governments? Can I still use these same guidelines to do the assessment in each of the level, or can I just combine it? So Srini, Guillaume, Julie, just one of you, any one of you, please.
Can I try to answer your question, Adenike? So what does it mean? The subnational expenditure, it's the expenditure that are incurred by the subnational governments themselves. So not the all public expenditure that occurred on the territory of a subnational government, but the ones that flows within the PFM system of the subnational itself. So for example, if you have in a territory deconcentration of the central government in charge of education or health, it would not be covered by the subnational assessment. Only the agencies belonging to the subnational governments are covered by the subnational PEFA. Regarding your other question, Adenike, about the different levels of subnational government, yes, you can apply, and as Serdar said, you can apply the PEFA to multi-million states as well as to a few thousand people municipality in Georgia. But maybe I would, if you authorize me, ask Mary, who is doing in South Africa both the assessment of municipalities and provinces. I think she has a clear idea of what it means to have a PEFA used for different levels of subnational governments.
Okay, Mary, in 1 minute, please, if you can just quickly give us that.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just be brief. Yes, it's possible to have it at different levels in terms of our intergovernmental framework. So the provinces depend mainly on the money that comes from the national in terms of the equitable share and conditional grant. So when we assess them based on that mainly. But when you come to the municipalities in South Africa, they collect their own revenue. And they also have liabilities. So the guidelines that we have just gone through now with the colleagues were really then giving more information on how can we assess the municipalities, make sure that they collect what they have to collect and then they spend accordingly. So it is possible. Thank you.
You're muted, Adenike.
Oh, okay. So thanks very much, Mary. Min, I have a question for you. So we know the question reads thus. It says, we know that the SOE sector poses fiscal risks in China. Did the PEFA assessment help in identifying and assessing these specific risks in the 8 Hunan provinces? Min?
Yes. SOEs in China by legislation is excluded from the general public sector. They are viewed as commercial enterprises. However, we recognize that they also impose fiscal risk to the government. So we added an annex to review their risks emanating from these local government financing vehicles, those SOEs, to the government.
Thanks very much, Min. That's helpful. So, Luz, let's talk about Argentina. And I just wanted to give you this insight in 1 minute. So, I mean, it was 100% virtual. Great thing. But how was data collected?
As I mentioned during my presentation, all the conversation and meetings were conducted through WebEx, Teams, and also through telephone or WhatsApp conversations. The documentation was entirely provided electronically through emails. In the case of San Juan, relevant fiscal and financial information was publicly available on the provincial website. So that helped the data collection process. Thank you
very much. That's really helpful. Thanks very much. Guillaume, Julie, I'll come back to you guys now. Somebody wants to know, and I think it's very, somebody wants to know if we have the legislative oversight as an indicator. And I think it will also be a good opportunity for somebody in your team to also talk about the fact that you're planning e-learnings, because somebody also wants to know how to understand the guidelines and whatever. So, Guillaume, Julie,
Yeah,
anyone who wants to
I'll take that question, Adenike. Indeed, I mean, the PEFA framework covers the entire budget cycle, and also the legislative scrutiny is an important part of it. So we have a specific indicator that deals with legislative scrutiny of the budget. So we look at the scope of the budget scrutiny, but in the same time, what are the legislative procedures for budget scrutiny? So I'll stop there. When it comes to the learning and knowledge, I mean, the PEFA Secretariat is very active in terms of providing knowledge, training to all the PEFA users. And we are currently developing a very comprehensive e-learning program, which will be available shortly. So please be tuned and visit the PEFA Secretariat and all our notes, because it will be available soon. We are also very active in terms of providing in-country training, as it was the case that Min mentioned in China, but also Argentina, South Africa. We provide also regional training. And I mean, being honest with you, we thought that during the COVID, it will be a little bit less training and knowledge activity, but to the contrary, it has been at the same level as pre-COVID, even higher, with all the virtual trainings that we are providing to all the PEFA users, the government officials as well. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julie. That's very helpful. And I know I have 1 minute, but I'll still another 1 minute to make it 2 minutes. So Mary, I want to give you a last word, and again in 1 minute. If you can just tell me 1, 2, 3 main challenges. You don't need to speak so much about, but what were the main challenges you faced during the PEFA assessment in the provinces?
Okay, the main challenges at first was not having the capacity within the country in terms of the experts who can conduct the assessment. So we had to import get people internationally to come and do that for us. So then added the challenge of people taking time for them to understand what the PEFA is and what is the objective. But I must say they were willing to learn, so then that's why we were able to move on. But we also got some provinces that were kind of delay the process, but because it's got a set time period, so we could not finish on time because it was that thing of back and forth and back and forth. But overall, I think that's when now we decided then to build the internal capacity because we had that challenge, and then we also want to have the financial challenge. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mary. So at this point, I would like to thank every of our speakers today. First, a sincere thanks to Julia and Gil for the great work you're doing in this regard and for the presentation. Sincere thanks to Min, Luz, and Mary for sharing your experience with us. This is really good. And of course, to Seda, our lead in subnational government. Sincere thanks for the continued work and for the collaboration with the PEFA Secretariat. This is really, really helpful. For colleagues, if I didn't answer your questions directly, please, you can get in touch with PEFA Secretariat and they will be ready to support and guide as much as possible. Thanks so much. And then I pass it over to Eric to give, to help us to close this event. Eric, over to you. And apologies for taking 2 minutes of your time.
No, thank you, Adenike, but you already thanked everyone, and I would like to reconfirm our special thanks to the PEFA Secretariat, not only for the presentation, for the organization of this webinar, but also for the daily work in promoting the PEFA assessment tool, the PEFA initiative, and PFM reforms across the world. Their availability is absolutely amazing. Thank you, Adenike, for your moderating this this session. And then the last word is to finally encourage all subnational entities that are attending this seminar to go for a PEFA at subnational level. You will see there's a lot of gain to get from this exercise. Thanks, everyone, and hope to see you soon for other webinars organized by the PEFA Secretariat. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Eric. And just to let colleagues know that the PEFA Secretariat's aim is to make sure that we share knowledge as much as possible on the very good work that the Secretariat is doing. Srini, who is the head of the Secretariat, is working very closely with all the great staff in the Secretariat. And at least once a month, that's why you told me, guys, I'm putting you on the spot. We'll be sharing some interesting work that we're doing on gender, on climate, on subnational government, and so many other new areas that are coming up, including using PEFA for your PFM reforms. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining, and do have a blessed day. Srini, colleagues, if you have anything to say, but I'm signing off.
Adenike, can I make a final comment? I mean, due to the time limitation, we couldn't answer to all the good questions that were raised. However, we at the Secretariat took note of all the questions, and we are going to send you the answers along with the presentation and the recording of the event, because it really matters to us, your comments, your questions and comments that you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.